Rain fell like shards of glass that morning. The church bells tolled, echoing through the marble halls as the mourners gathered in black. Cameras flashed. Billionaire heiress Elara Voss, beloved philanthropist and fashion empire queen, was gone, or so the world believed. At the front of the chapel, her husband Adrian, tall, handsome, and seemingly grief-stricken, clutched the podium as he gave a trembling eulogy. His voice cracked, his tears fell, and every word was a lie, because Elara wasn't dead. She watched it all from the balcony above, hidden beneath a black veil and a borrowed name. Her heart ached as she saw the man she once loved perform sorrow for the cameras, while the woman sitting behind him, the one touching his shoulder, wore her diamond bracelet. The same bracelet Elara had placed in their bedroom drawer just 2 nights before her supposed accident. Her fingers curled into fists. She remembered the night she discovered the truth. The late-night messages, the whispered calls, the secret offshore transfer in Adrian's name. The betrayal ran deeper than infidelity. It was treachery wrapped in charm. Elara's death was a lie, but his mask was about to crack. She whispered under her breath, a vow only she could hear. "You buried me alive, Adrian. Now it's my turn to haunt you." Before the funeral, before the lies, there was love, or at least what Elara thought was love. She met Adrian Cole 5 years earlier, at a charity gala her company sponsored in Monaco. He wasn't like the other men orbiting her wealth and fame. He was quiet, sharp-minded, ambitious but humble. While others boasted about yachts and stock portfolios, Adrian had talked about dreams, building affordable housing, helping orphans, starting something real. He made her laugh again after years of being seen as a trophy. He looked at her like a person, not an empire. Within months, their love became headline news. The tabloids called them the billionaire and the architect. The wedding, set on a clifftop in Santorini, was something out of a fantasy. White roses, golden arches, and a sky that blushed for them. And when he said, "I'll protect you for life," she had believed him. Elara had never been naive. Her world was full of sharks in suits, people who smiled while planning your downfall. But Adrian was different, or so she thought. He had the calm steadiness her chaotic world lacked. At least until the silence began. It started small, missed dinners, long nights at the office. His sudden defensiveness when she asked about finances. Then came the coldness. The way he'd stop meeting her eyes. The distance in bed. The half-smiles that hid exhaustion or guilt. But Elara had her flaws too. She buried herself in work, in board meetings and interviews, convincing herself it was just a rough patch. Until one night, she overheard his phone vibrating at midnight. The message read, "She suspects nothing. Tomorrow it'll all be ours." And beneath it, the sender's name, Isla, her assistant, her best friend. That was the night her heart cracked. But she smiled anyway, because Elara Voss didn't confront betrayal. She studied it. She planned for it. Over the next few days, she began quietly withdrawing cash, moving shares, securing passwords. She smiled at Adrian across dinner, kissed him goodnight, and whispered, "I trust you." She was already planning her escape, and her revenge. 3 weeks after she saw the message, Elara Voss died. At least that's what the world was told. It was a Friday night, stormy, chaotic, and strangely poetic. Her security team reported a car accident on the coastal road near her private villa. The cliff was steep, the guardrail shattered, and her car had plunged into the waves below. By dawn, they found the wreck, her purse, and a strand of her signature auburn hair tangled in the metal. The nation mourned. The media feasted. Adrian sobbed on live television. But beneath the crashing waves, in a small fishing boat anchored just half a mile from the scene, Elara watched the lights of her mansion flicker in the rain. She was alive, drenched, trembling, and free. Beside her sat Rafi, a trusted driver who owed her his life. He'd staged the crash with precision, switched license plates, burned a decoy vehicle, and leaked the accident footage to the press. He didn't ask why, only nodded when she said, "If I vanish, he'll show his true face." Within 24 hours, Elara Voss became Evelyn Hart, a woman with no past. She cut her hair, dyed it black, and disappeared into the quiet corners of Lisbon, where no one asked questions and everyone had secrets. From there, she began to watch. Through her network of contacts, she tracked Adrian's next moves. Within a week of her death, he transferred half her company's shares into a new account, his. Within 2, Isla moved into her mansion. And by the 3rd, Adrian had announced a new foundation in honor of Elara Voss. But Elara knew better. It was a front, a way to liquidate her assets and cover his tracks. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was surgical, cold, perfectly timed. That was when she made her second decision. If Adrian wanted to bury her, she'd rise from the ashes with proof. And when she returned, she wouldn't just take her life back. She'd destroy the illusion he built from her ashes. Her first move: infiltrate her own company as someone new. The woman who once ruled empires was now a ghost haunting her own kingdom. 3 months after her death, Evelyn Hart walked through the polished glass doors of Voss Atelier, the luxury empire she had built from scratch. Her heart clenched at the sight of the familiar logo, her name, now plastered beside Adrian's. Voskhol Industries. He'd merged the company and erased her legacy. But Elara had done her homework. She'd returned under a new identity, complete with forged credentials and a believable resume. Her disguise was subtle darker hair, olive skin tone, glasses, and a quiet, humble demeanor. Gone was the commanding elegance of Elara Voss. In her place stood Evelyn, a senior design consultant from Madrid. Her first day back felt like walking through a mausoleum of memories. Employees whispered her name in reverent tones. Photos of her hung in the lobby beside bouquets from admirers. The late Elara Voss, visionary, philanthropist, icon. If only they knew the truth. The visionary was standing right beside them, breathing their recycled air. And then she saw him, Adrian. He stood at the far end of the corridor, tailored suit, clean-shaven, charismatic as ever. But there was something colder about him now, a hardness that made her chest ache. He shook hands, smiled for cameras, spoke about moving on. Beside him stood Isla, wearing Elara's favorite sapphire earrings, the ones Adrian had once said matched her eyes. Elara forced a calm smile as she approached the boardroom, but her pulse thundered. Their eyes met briefly, and for a fleeting second, Adrian froze. She saw confusion flicker across his face. Recognition, maybe. Then he blinked it away and extended his hand. "You must be Evelyn Hart," he said, voice smooth as glass. "Welcome to Voskhol." She took his hand, her voice steady though her heart trembled. "It's an honor, Mr. Cole. I've admired your wife's work for years." He smiled faintly. She'd be pleased to hear that. The words cut deep. But Elara smiled because he had no idea who he was speaking to. Over the following weeks, she worked quietly, observing. She gained access to private files, copied documents, and began tracing offshore accounts. The deeper she dug, the uglier it got. Adrian hadn't just betrayed her personally. He'd been siphoning millions through fake charities, using her foundation as a cover. Every transaction was dated right after her death. He hadn't wasted a single tear. One night, as she worked late in the office, she found a hidden email folder on Isla's computer. Dozens of messages, plans, meetings, even affection. But one stood out. "She's still watching. I can feel it." Adrian. Elara's blood ran cold. He suspected. The game was no longer one-sided. It was a Thursday night when the world Elara built began to tilt. The rain outside the Voskhol Tower drummed against the glass like an unending heartbeat. Elara sat alone in Isla's office, the glow of the computer screen painting her face in cold blue light. She'd been digging for weeks, chasing numbers, following trails, decrypting messages. And then she found it, a folder marked Project Solace. She opened it expecting another offshore account. Instead, it contained medical records and a video. Her pulse raced as she pressed play. The screen flickered, showing Adrian, sitting beside a hospital bed. And in that bed was his mother. Pale, frail, surrounded by tubes. Adrian's voice trembled. The surgery costs double what we expected. I can't lose you too. Just hold on, Mom. I'll fix it. I'll fix everything. The timestamp hit her like a fist. The video was recorded 3 days before their wedding. The money he'd stolen, her money, wasn't just for greed. It was to save his mother's life. Elara's breath caught. Her heart, which had hardened into stone, cracked a little. She remembered his constant worry, the secret calls he'd taken in the hallways, the way his eyes dimmed after every doctor's appointment he'd refused to explain. She had mistaken desperation for betrayal. But then, another file. An email chain between Adrian and Isla. Elara froze. The world tilted again, but now in the opposite direction. He hadn't just been hiding money. He'd been hiding the truth. Adrian wasn't betraying her. He'd been protecting her from something she hadn't yet understood. But if that was true, then what was Isla's role? And why did Adrian still go through with the lies, the fake grief, the press appearances? There was one last video file, encrypted, marked with her name. For Elara. If you ever see this. She tried to open it, but it was password protected. And only one man knew the key. Adrian Cole. Elara leaned back, trembling. The air felt too thin to breathe. For the first time since she faked her death, she wasn't sure who the enemy was anymore. Was she the avenger or the fool? The line between love and vengeance had blurred beyond recognition. Elara didn't sleep that night. She sat in her rented apartment overlooking the old Lisbon harbor, the glow of city lights flickering over her reflection in the window. For months, she had moved like a ghost, planning, watching, plotting her vengeance. But now her vengeance had no shape. What if everything she believed had been wrong? The video replayed in her mind. Adrian at the hospital, whispering promises to a dying woman. His voice breaking, his hands shaking. That wasn't the voice of a monster. It was the voice of a man drowning in love and fear. And then the email. She'll hate me, but she'll live free. Free from what? She opened her laptop again, desperate for answers. She combed through files she'd stolen, contracts she'd copied, accounts she'd traced. Hours blurred into dawn. And then she found something that made her blood run cold. A letter from her father's lawyer. It was dated 6 months before her supposed death, and addressed to Adrian Cole. As per Elara's father's will, control of Voss Holdings will automatically transfer to the spouse upon her death or declared mental incapacity. Should she choose to dissolve the marriage before the 5-year term, the inheritance will revert to the state trust. Her mouth went dry. Adrian had inherited everything because she had died. She stared at the paper, her heart pounding like a war drum. Was it all part of a grander manipulation? Was his mother just another piece on the board? Her mind was chaos. Nothing made sense anymore. She slammed the laptop shut, tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't know who you are anymore, Adrian. For the first time since faking her death, she felt something close to despair. She had built this labyrinth of lies to expose him, and now she was trapped in it. That night, Elara went to the cliffs near her old villa, the same place her car had been found. The sea roared below, waves crashing against the rocks like thunder. She stood at the edge, wind whipping her hair, memories flooding back. Their wedding, their laughter, their first kiss. Was any of it real? She whispered. Then a voice behind her. Depends who you ask. Elara spun around. Her breath caught. Adrian. He stood there, soaked from the rain, eyes shadowed, expression unreadable. I knew you'd come here, he said softly. You always come here when you're lost. Her knees went weak. He stepped closer, his gaze piercing through the disguise she'd worn for months. You can change your name, Elara, he said quietly, but I'd know your heartbeat anywhere. She froze, exposed, speechless, trembling. He knew. He had known all along. The storm howled around them, but the silence between them was louder. Why? She finally whispered. Why the lies, Adrian? Why let me think you destroyed everything? He looked down, his jaw tight, eyes glistening with something she couldn't name. Because the only way to save you was to let the world think you were dead. The storm raged on as Adrian's words echoed through the night. The only way to save you was to let the world think you were gone. Elara's throat tightened. Save me from what? Adrian exhaled, running a trembling hand through his rain-soaked hair. From your father's enemies. From the people who killed him. Her eyes widened. That was an accident. No, Adrian interrupted, his voice breaking. It wasn't. The wind howled between them, carrying the weight of that truth. He stepped closer. Your father was blackmailed for years. The same men who wanted his company tried to use you next. When we got married, they started coming after you. Through me, through your foundation. When I realized how deep it went, I had two choices. Let them take you down, or make you disappear. Elara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. So you lied to me. You let me believe you betrayed me. Because it was the only way to keep you alive, he whispered. If they thought you were dead, they'd stop hunting you. I had to play the villain, Elara. I had to make it believable. Her knees gave out and she fell to the wet ground. All the hate, the anger, the vengeance, it all cracked under the weight of his confession. I wanted to hate you so badly, she whispered. But every time I tried, I remembered how you looked at me on our wedding day. I thought I was losing my mind. Adrian knelt beside her, reaching out slowly, as if touching her might break the illusion. You weren't losing your mind, he said softly. You were losing me, and that was the price I paid to keep you breathing. She stared at him, her heart torn between fury and forgiveness. And Isla? She asked, her voice trembling. Adrian sighed. Elara's breath hitched. Isla, her friend, her supposed betrayer, another victim of the game. The waves crashed below, and for a long moment, there was only silence. Then Elara stood, lifting her chin, the fire slowly returning to her eyes. You should have trusted me, she said. We could have fought them together. Adrian nodded, rain dripping from his lashes. You're right, but I didn't want to risk your life for my mistake. The storm softened around them. The thunder faded, leaving only the sound of the sea and two hearts beating in unison again. Raw, uncertain, but alive. Elara looked out toward the horizon. The same waves that once faked her death now mirrored her rebirth. She finally understood. She hadn't lost everything. She'd simply been remade. The woman who faked her death for revenge was gone. In her place stood someone stronger. Someone who would take her company, her name, and her destiny back. And this time she wouldn't hide. 2 weeks later, the world gasped. Elara Voss was alive. The headlines hit like an earthquake. Billionaire bride returns from the dead. Adrian Cole's wife stages her own resurrection. Voss empire shaken by scandal and secrets. But it wasn't just a comeback. It was a declaration of war. Elara didn't hide this time. She walked straight into the Voss Cole Tower in a white suit. Symbolic, defiant, radiant. Cameras flashed, employees froze, and Adrian, waiting by the elevator, met her gaze with equal parts awe and dread. You could have told me you were going public, he murmured. Where's the fun in that? She replied, her eyes glinting. Together they entered the boardroom where the real monsters sat. The same investors who had extorted her father, laundered funds, and turned Adrian into a pawn in their scheme. Men in tailored suits and cold smiles. Gentlemen, Elara began, her voice calm but lethal. You buried the wrong woman. One of them sneered. This is ridiculous. You have no proof. She pressed a button on her tablet. Screens flickered to life, displaying encrypted accounts, offshore transactions, secret wire transfers, all signed in their names. You moved money through my foundation, she continued. You used my husband, my name, and my father's death as your cover. And you thought no one would notice. Adrian stood beside her, silent but strong. It wasn't about redemption anymore, it was about truth. The men began to panic. One shouted for his lawyer. Another lunged toward the door. But Elara blocked it, eyes blazing. You tried to kill me, she said coldly. Now the world will watch you fall. Outside the glass walls, journalists were already gathering. Her team, the same loyal staff she'd secretly reassembled over the past 2 weeks, live-streamed the confrontation to every major outlet. There was no escape. The empire they'd built on deceit began to crumble. And in that chaos, one man, Victor Harrow, the ringleader, drew a gun. "You were supposed to stay dead," he roared. The shot rang out. Time fractured. Adrian stepped in front of her, instinctively, selflessly, and the bullet grazed his shoulder. He fell to the ground, grimacing. Elara caught him, her hands trembling. "No, no, no, Adrian, stay with me." He smiled weakly. "Guess I couldn't let you die twice." Security burst in, subduing Victor. Police swarmed the building. Reporters screamed her name. But all Elara could see was Adrian, the man who'd lied, loved, and bled for her. She pressed her forehead to his. "We're even now," she whispered. He chuckled faintly. "Even? I think you still owe me a honeymoon." For the first time in months, she laughed through her tears. By the time the dust settled, the men behind her father's death were in custody. Her company was safe. Her name was hers again. But most of all, her heart was finally free. 3 months later, the Voss estate was quiet again, not with grief this time, but with grace. The gardens had grown wild during her absence, yet somehow the flowers bloomed brighter. It was as if the earth itself had waited for her return. Elara sat on the marble balcony overlooking the lake, the same view she once shared with her father. The sun dipped low, turning the sky into 1,000 shades of gold. A soft breeze brushed her hair, carrying the scent of roses and rain. She closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while, there was no fear in her heart. The world now knew the truth. The men who orchestrated her father's death were behind bars. The foundation she'd rebuilt in his name, the Voss Legacy Fund, was helping victims of corporate fraud find justice. Her story had become a symbol of resilience. And through it all, she'd learned the hardest lesson of all. Forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was freedom. Down below, footsteps echoed on the gravel. Adrian. His arm was still bandaged, but the wound was healing. He paused by the roses, the same place he'd once confessed his lies, and plucked a single white bloom. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me," he said softly. Elara smiled faintly. "I wasn't sure either." He walked closer, every step hesitant but hopeful. "I don't expect you to forget. I needed you to know I never stopped loving you. Not once." She turned toward him. The man who had been her enemy, her accomplice, and somewhere in between, her heart's undoing. He looked away, guilt shadowing his face. "Then what happens now?" Elara reached for his hand. Steady, calm. "Sure. Now, we stop pretending to be perfect, and we start being real." His fingers tightened around hers, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind carried only the sound of waves kissing the shore, slow, eternal, forgiving. Later that evening, she stood before the mirror, not as the billionaire's widow or the betrayed bride, but as the woman who had risen from her own ashes. Her reflection didn't haunt her anymore. It reminded her who she was, Elara Voss, survivor, strategist, woman reborn. She whispered to her reflection, "Sometimes you have to lose everything to remember who you are." A soft knock came at the door. "Adrian, you ready?" She turned, smiling. "Always." They walked out together, not as saviors or saints, but as two people finally free of their ghosts. As they passed the grand staircase, sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the portraits of her family. Her father's warm eyes seemed to follow her, proud and peaceful. And somewhere deep inside, she felt him whisper, "You did it, my girl." She smiled through tears, her heart full, her spirit light. If you were Elara, would you give love a second chance after betrayal or choose peace and walk away? Share your thoughts in the comments below, Speech Balloon. And remember, truth may burn bridges, but it always lights the way home. If you enjoyed this story, kindly do well to hit the like button and leave a comment down below. I want you to become a part of this family. There are more heart-warming stories awaiting you. Thank you for listening.